Welcome back to the People's Cabinet. Okay, so a new poll from the New York Times released this morning shows progress towards what we already thought, which is Zohran Mamdani is going to win the mayor's race in New York, and that even with the rumors of people dropping out, it will not stop Mamdani. So here's a top line: Mamdani is winning 46-24 over Cuomo, Curtis Sliwa at 15%, Eric Adams at 9%. It's actually pretty unbelievable that the sitting mayor is at 9% in this poll. If you unpack this, there's other things that I want to talk about Mamdani and how he's expanding his tent that I think are really important to point out. First and foremost, as I said, there's a lot of conversation about Eric Adams and whether he will drop out to take a Saudi ambassadorship or otherwise, because there were previous polls that showed that with a with him dropping out and Sliwa dropping out, that a head-to-head Cuomo would be leading. That is actually no longer the case. This poll shows, at least, that even with everyone else dropping out, Cuomo still has a 4-point behind Zohran Mamdani. I would also say, just given the nature and the intangibles of elections, even with Mamdani and Cuomo, if that were to occur, just by virtue of the way that Mamdani has approached this race and the way the public perception has solidified at this point, I would find it hard to believe even in a head-to-head Andrew Cuomo would beat Zohran Mamdani. This is more evidence, by the way, of some of the data that came out of this. An interesting point was around 60% of likely voters said Mr. Mamdani was inspirational, had good character, and cared about people like them. He is the only candidate viewed positively by a majority of voters despite months of attacks against him. And this is months of attacks. This is from a number of people, especially Andrew Cuomo. Here's a chart that shows a number of different issues: affordability 49-23, crime 30-29, dealing with the Trump administration 36-31. So all this notion, oh, he's not experienced enough for the Trump for that. To deal with Trump just doesn't hold water from the public perception perspective. Eric Adams is not going quietly into the night either, but it seems like he is directing his attacks towards Andrew Cuomo. As I mentioned, there were rumors of him dropping out and Andrew Cuomo, trying to orchestrate this. This is what Eric Adams said about Andrew Cuomo.
And to New Yorkers, I want to speak directly to you. There has been so much speculation, communications, announcements of what I'm doing, no matter what I have stated over and over again publicly. So I want to be clear with you. Andrew Cuomo is a snake and a liar.
So obviously no love lost there. If you look at the way Zohran Mamdani has now proceeded in terms of how he's expanding his tent, he was recently on with Abby Phillip, and there were two things that I thought were interesting. I mentioned the 60% of likely voters saying that he had good character. Here's a clip about his answer when Abby Phillip asked him if trillionaires should exist.
On another note, your democratic socialism has been just the center of everything that people talk about. But in this country, there's a big debate about the wealthy, the uber wealthy, the gap between the rich and the poor. Just this week, Tesla offered a pay package to Elon Musk that would potentially make him a trillionaire. Do you think trillionaires should exist?
I think the better question is whether working people should exist, because what we're seeing right now is, amidst this incredible wealth, we have people who are keeping the city running that have to now live outside of the city, outside of the state. There are New Yorkers who are living in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Connecticut because they just can't afford to live here. Amidst all of that, we have talk of trillionaires. I mean, it tells you where our political priorities are. And that's what is so frustrating, is that when we talk about the cuts to SNAP benefits here in New York City, the throwing of millions off of their health insurance, it's not just a incident that has taken place in Washington, D.C. It is a function of the largest wealth transfer we've ever seen in our history of our country's politics. Yeah.
So this one's really interesting because there are people all across New York and people who work in New York who have to commute from miles and tens of miles and hundreds of miles away every day because they can't afford to live in New York. It's a really interesting way to phrase it that sadly many Democrats don't even seem to have that thought enter their mind, let alone said. And it is true. And this is this is one of many examples of how Mamdani has spoken about affordability that I think really relates to people. He's talked about, people say, well, what about rich people moving out of New York? His response is oftentimes, well, what about working people who have to move out all the time? As somebody who used to be chief of staff to a city, I appreciate how tax revenue fuels the city. But if you look at the data, the wealthy don't move out based on taxes. People want to be a part of New York, and oftentimes that's just a cover for people not wanting to pay more taxes. There was another question that Abby raised to him, and this was around this notion that he's not being endorsed by some Democrats and his reaction to that. Now, a lot of mainstream Democrats are not endorsing Zohran Mamdani right now. I would say that is hurting those mainstream Democrats far more than it is hurting Mamdani. But here is his reaction when asked.
Tom Swazi, he's a representative from here in New York. He often talks about you and Trump in the same sentence. But the suggestion there is that you know how to diagnose a problem, which you have on housing, on food, on childcare. But the solution that you're offering is all too simple. It's overpromising and in ways that you cannot deliver. Is there a risk that you might overpromise New Yorkers on things that you can't execute on?
I would call him a colleague because we are part of the same party, the Democratic Party. And as Ed Koch said, a former Democratic mayor of New York City, that if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 issues, vote for me. 12 out of 12, see a psychiatrist. We have to have room for disagreement within a party. Otherwise, we just become a monotone that doesn't accept the innate tension of people coming together.
This is not a candidate that the mainstream Democrats had endorsed at the beginning. The perception was that Cuomo was going to win with his war chest. It would have been very easy for Zohran Mamdani to try to establish himself in some kind of anti-establishment frame in this. But instead, he spoke in a way that I think most people should speak, which is about how this should be a big tent party and that we should welcome different ideas to the table. So the fact that Mamdani took that tact, I think, was really important. There's another aspect to this that I think is really important to point out. Mr. Mamdani has an edge with all racial groups, leading Mr. Cuomo narrowly among Black voters. This is a change from what we saw in the primary, where Mamdani actually trailed older Black voters in terms of vote share relative to others, such as Governor Cuomo. This is a big deal. Everything is trending in the right direction for Zohran Mamdani. He's expanding his tent. His language is such that he continues to appeal to more and more voters. That's a little bit about this race. Believe me, there's 2 months left, and I'm sure that there is much more to come here. Let's stay close on it, and it should be pretty interesting down the stretch. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the People's Cabinet. If you did, please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and tell us who else you would like to see sworn in. And let us know in the comments what other topics you'd like us to cover. Let's go.